Hello, sixth graders. We are working in chapter 2, lesson 3 with percents and decimals. Today we are working on page 109, and our learning target today is that we will be able to find a percent of a quantity as a rate per 100. So for example, 30% of a quantity means 30 over 100 times that quantity. And we will be able to solve problems involving finding the whole given a part in the percent. And again, make sure you are on page 109. So at a school, a recent survey tells the favorite subjects of students at Martin Middle School. 28% of students said that math is their favorite subject. 16% of students said art. 21% of students said science. 13% of students said English. 15% of students said social studies. And 7% of students chose another subject. So write a fraction with a denominator of 100 to represent the percent for each subject. So for math, we had 28%. And remember, we already talked about this earlier, but percent means per 100. So 28% would be 28 per 100. Science, 21% of students would be 21 over 100 to write that as a fraction. Art, 16% would be 16 per 100. Social studies, 15% would be 15 per 100. English, 13% would be 13 per 100, and other 7% would be 7 out of 100. So write each fraction from exercise 1 as a decimal. And so you'll notice that when we wrote each of these as a fraction per 100, we did not simplify, even where we knew we could simplify, like both even numbers or both divisible by 5, both even. So the reason that we did not simplify is because we are actually going to write them as decimals, and then we'll eventually move over to percentages as well. So what we know about decimals from working earlier in our textbook, our place values for decimals are base 10 systems. So we have tenths, we have hundredths, and we have thousandths. So when and so on. So when we're working with percents, remember that root word is cent. Okay, so it's per 100. So we actually want to keep that in with a denominator of 100, because that's going to help us to easily write these as decimals with a hundredths place. Okay, so when we want to write these as a decimal, math, how do we read this decimal, or this fraction, excuse me? 28 hundredths. So how do we write that as a decimal? 28 hundredths. Okay, science, 21 hundredths. There it is as a fraction. Here it is as a decimal, 21 hundredths. Remember, here's the tenths place, here's the hundredths place. Tenths place, hundredths place. Art, 16% of students said art is their favorite subject. 16 hundredths. Social studies, 15%, 15 hundredths. 15 hundredths. So those are all equivalent values, right? 15% is equivalent to 15 over 100, 15 hundredths, is equivalent to 0.15, 15 hundredths. Okay, English, 13% is equivalent to 13 over 100, 13 hundredths, is equivalent to 0.13, 13 hundredths. Okay, other students who chose another subject not listed among those 5, 7%, 7 hundredths, 7 over 100, and 7 hundredths, 0.07. Remember that 7 needs to be in the hundredths place, so the 0 goes in the tenths place. So number 3 says make a conjecture. Look back at exercise 2, compare the decimals to the percents, explain how to write a percent as a decimal. So to write a percent as a decimal, if you compare these, so let's look at 15%. Here's for social studies, 15%, social studies 0.15. So we take off the per 100, which means divide by 100. Okay, but if we take off the percent sign, which means per 100, which means divide by 100, okay, then we need to move our decimal 2 places to the left, which is the same thing as dividing by 100. Okay, So we will drop the percent sign. Okay, which means per 100. But if I drop the per 100, which means divide by 100, I have to make sure I actually do divide by 100. So to divide the 15 by 100, I move my decimal 2 places to the left. So move the decimal 2 places to the left. Okay, which makes sense because we're really just following the instructions. 15% means 15 per 100, which means 15 divided by 100. So here's my number 15. To divide by 100, I move my decimal 2 places to the left, 0.15, okay? So 15% is equivalent to 15 over 100 is equivalent to 0.15, 1500ths, okay? So again, to write a percent as a decimal, we drop the percent sign, which means percent per 100, which means divide by 100. And then we have to actually do that. We can't just get rid of the percent sign and not change anything else. If we drop the percent sign, we need to actually divide by 100, which means in order to do that easily, we just take our decimal, which is currently here, and move it 2 places to the left, okay? Okay, let's turn to page 110. All right, in our learning targets today, we're going to first learn how to write percents as decimals, and then we're going to go the other way around, write decimals as percents. Okay, so these will just be inverse, they'll be opposites of each other. Okay, page 110. Okay, to write a percent as a decimal, divide by 100 and move the percent sign. This is the same as moving the decimal point 2 places to the left. Okay, so we just talked about that on the previous page. Another way to write a fraction as a decimal is to write the percent as a fraction, then write the fraction as a decimal. Okay, so let's look at a couple of different methods to write a percent as a decimal. So method 1, so we have 56%. Write the percent as a fraction. Okay, so 56% will be 56 over 100 because percent means per 100. Per is that division sign or the fraction bar, 100. Okay, and then we take that fraction and we convert the fraction into decimal form. Okay, and then the second method is move the decimal point and move the decimal 2 places to the left and drop the percent sign. So that's the second method. And you can use whichever method you prefer. All right, so let's look at example 2, 8%. So 8% means 8 per 100. Remember, cent means 100. Okay, and then I see that's 800ths. So to write that as a decimal, I put the 8 in the 100ths place, and then as a placeholder in the 10ths place, we put a 0 because we can't, if we don't put anything there, then it would be 8/10. If we just wrote 0.8, that would be 8/10. Okay, let's look at example 3. 2%. Okay, and we'll use the second method, move the decimal point. Okay, so we'll take our decimal, move it 2 places to the left. And what goes in that empty place as a placeholder? 0. So 2% can be rewritten as 0.02. And anytime we have a decimal without a whole number to the left of it, we write a 0 as a placeholder. That just makes our decimal stand out and make it obvious where our decimal is. And also lets us know that it's not a period like ending a sentence and something before it. It's a decimal point, so 0.02. All right, let's look at the bottom of page 110. We have 3 examples. So 32%. Okay, so 32%, we'll use this as the fraction. We'll use the that first method. So 32% is the same as 32 per 100. So 32 over 100. So how do I read that fraction? I read it as 32 hundredths. And then how do I write that as a decimal? 32 hundredths. Okay. For letter B, I'll use method 2, the move the decimal point, drop the percent sign method. So 6%, I'll take my decimal, percent means per 100. So I'm going to divide by 100. Okay, dividing by 100 is the same as moving my decimal 1, 2, places to the left. And what goes in as a placeholder there? A 0. And then since I divided by 100, that's my per 100, my percent. So I can drop the percent sign now. So this is 0.06. 6/100ths, 6%, 6 per 100. 6/100ths, 6 per 100. Okay, those are equivalent. Okay, C, 93% means 93 per 100, percent per 100th, okay? So how do I read this fraction? 93/100ths. How do I write it as a decimal? 93/100ths. So 93% is equivalent to 93/100ths, or 93/100ths, excuse me, is the same as 93/100ths. Okay, so that was how we write percents as decimals. Now on page 111, we're just going to go the opposite direction. Okay, now we're going to write decimals as percents. It's going to be just the opposite. To write decimals as a percent, multiply by 100 and add a percent sign. Okay, so we're not changing the value when we multiply by 100 and then divide by 100, because really the percent sign means per 100, or divide by 100. So this is the same as moving the decimal point 2 places to the right and add a percent sign. So move the decimal 2 places to the right and add a percent sign. Okay, remember the percent sign, it's top right to bottom left when we write it. So it's like the number 7 without the top line, okay? So moving the decimal 2 places to the right is the same as multiplying by 100. Okay. Another way to write a decimal as a percent is to write the decimal as a fraction with a denominator of 100, and then write the fraction as a percent. Okay, so let's look at those two methods. Write 0.38, write 38/100ths as a percent. Okay, so the first method is to change it to a fraction, which is easy to do when we're working with decimals, because it's a base 10. This is tenths. This is the 100ths place. Okay, the 3 is in the 10ths place, the 8 is in the 100ths place. So we read the number, 38, and then we read the place value. The last place value, the 8 is in the 100ths place, so 38/100ths, 38/100ths. Okay, and then we write that as a percent. 38 per 100 is the same as 38%. Okay, method 2, move the decimal point. So here is our starting number again, 0.38, 38/100ths, 0.38. So here we move the decimal 2 places to the right, which is the same as multiplying by 100. So 1, 2, and then add the percent sign, which is the same as dividing by 100. So essentially you haven't changed your value at all, because here, when you moved your decimal 2 places to the right, that's the same as multiplying by 100. When you add the percent, that means per 100, or divide by 100. Divide by 100, you haven't changed the value. They're all equivalent, okay? So let's look at example 5. Okay, write 0.2 as a percent. Okay, right? And I'm going to read this correctly. Mathematically, we read this as 2/100ths. So, or excuse me, I apologize, 2/10ths. So 0.2, we read that as 2/10ths. That is the 10ths place, okay? So when I write it as a fraction, I write it as 2/10. Okay, now I want to make that into a percent. Remember, percent means per 100. So I want to make this out of 100. So what did I do to my denominator to get to 100? I need to multiply by 10. So what will I need to do to my numerator? I will also need to multiply by 10, and this will give me 20/100ths. Okay, so 20/100ths is the same as 20 per 100, or 20%. All right, let's look at the bottom of page 111. Write each decimal as a percent. So I'll change this. I like working with the fractions because I like to remind you that decimal, fraction, percents, these are all interchangeable and equivalent. So I like pulling in that fraction to help to remind us that these are all just 3 different representations of the same exact number, okay? So 47/100ths. So 47/100ths is the same as 47 hundredths. This is just written as a decimal. This is just written as a fraction, okay? 47 hundredths is the same as 47 per hundred, or 47%, okay? So when you think of money, this would be 47 cents, which is 47 hundredths of a dollar, or 47% of a dollar, okay? We wouldn't write it this way. Typically with money, we use the decimal, okay? But these are all different representations of the same exact number. They're all equivalent. So we write it as a percent, 47%, okay? So I'll use, I'm gonna use that same method again, and I'll use the, actually I'll use the I'll use the second method for this one, and I'll use method 1 again for letter F. Okay, so letter E, 73%. So we can use our other method, okay, move the decimal 2 places to the right. So 0.73, that's 73 hundredths. So I'm going to multiply by 100 by moving my decimal 2 places to the right. I can't just go around and take numbers and multiply them by 100. That changes their value. Okay, so if I multiplied by 100, that's times 100, I have to balance that out with something else. That's the percent sign per 100, which means I am dividing by 100. So 73%. All right, I'm gonna go back to the fraction method for letter F. So 5 tenths is how we read this number, 5 tenths. And if I want to scale that up to percent, which means per 100, remember cent is the root word for 100. So I need to make that per 100. How do I get from 10 to 100? Times 10. So what do I need to do to my 5? Times 10 also. So that's 50 hundredths. 50 hundredths is the same as 50 per 100, 50%. Okay, so that was chapter 2, lesson 3. And in this lesson, we learned how to write percents as decimals. And we also learned how to write decimals as percents.